How's everybody doing? That's nice. When you coming to El Salvador?
Right. Who's been to El Salvador?
Yeah.
Show of hands. Okay, there's a lot. I had the chance to spend some time with both of you in El Salvador. Before we jump into it, though, I do want to just share a note of appreciation because I was doing a talk at BitBlock Boom about the evolving media narrative of Bitcoin, and so I went into the archives of when Bitcoin was first reported on in mainstream news. And when Max and Stacy first started talking about it on the Keiser report. And really, I think that they have done more work than anyone to increase Bitcoin awareness and adoption and education. And they're doing so much now for El Salvador. So just a round of applause because Max and Stacy were there from the beginning when Bitcoin was, just a couple of dollars. All right, so let's talk about El Salvador because today there was a big announcement. El Salvador is launching its first mining pool, and that's a partnership between Volcano Energy, which we see on your hat, and Luxor Mining Pool. So why don't you share a little bit more about that? And especially, for those that aren't familiar with Volcano Energy, it's a $1 billion startup, public-private partnership. So what should we know?
Right. Well, Lava Pool is going to be El Salvador's major asset. It's going to be a major pool. And, listening to the previous discussion and thinking about El Salvador in this context, I think with El Salvador, with Bitcoin mining and with Bitcoin, we're really taking the approach of creating a brand because particularly in the Bitcoin mining space, I see it becoming more commodified. Commodification is going to set in. I see it becoming basically like utility companies in the next 10 or 15 years. And they don't really make a ton of money. They have to pay big fat dividends to stay solvent, don't they? So brand is king. It always has been, always will be. So with El Salvador, we have the Bitcoin mining up Volcano Energy. It evolved from a bond offering to essentially an equity offering. And as you pointed out, it's a $1 billion project. $250 million has already been deployed. 241 megawatts is currently being built out. We have a business plan essentially to smooth out the volatility in price, because that's essentially, as a financial engineer, which is my background, when I looked at the business, I said, this is the thing, you've got to mitigate the volatility risk. So we do that in a couple of ways. Principally, we introduced this idea of a rehash function. Essentially, right now we're set up to where 50% of all the output goes right back into hashing. So as we head into the halving, we're just going to keep kind of the rehash function. Just keep it, investing in everything goes into more hash power. And then lastly, I'll just say with the mining pool, we're directing folks to send their hash to us in El Salvador because it's the country that made Bitcoin legal tender. It's this epicenter of the global Bitcoin revolution. And as far as the nation states came up in the previous discussion, are they a threat or are they a factor in Bitcoin? The fact is that money existed before the nation state. The nation state killed money, and now Bitcoin's going to kill the nation state. So I don't see the nation state as a model surviving really another 10 or 15 years. This current global conflict that's emerging, I think that'll wipe them all out finally. And we have a post-nation state world where it's running on a Bitcoin standard, and you have a global hash race where the country, those groups or those entities that have the biggest hash power and the most Bitcoin that's where the geopolitics, that's where the power struggle is going to be about mining and hoarding Bitcoin essentially. So it's not about governments banning Bitcoin, it's about governments engaging in what I coined being the global hash race. Essentially, and I said that 3 or 4 years ago or 5 years ago. So this is really what's happening now. Countries are really stepping up. They're saying, we need to get in the game because this is the only game. This is the last game. This is the final game. This is humans at their final state. Bitcoin nirvana. Thank you. Have a great day.
Stacy?
Max is the chairman of Volcano Energy, and obviously he's the showman and the guy who is out there in the media. I run the Bitcoin office and work on the government side of, the Bitcoin policy. So it's important to realize, I think, that President Bukele is a Bitcoiner, but he's a leader first, right? So he's a leader of one of these nation states that Max says is going to disappear. He's a leader, and his Bitcoin policy is within what he's doing. And I think everybody in the world has seen what he has done to El Salvador. He's transformed it completely from a poor country with the most violent country in the world to just 4 years later, the safest in the entire Western Hemisphere. You only can do that if you're a leader. Bitcoin is part of his policy of economic liberty, and Volcano Energy and Volcano mining and Bitcoin mining, what he's doing is, with Bitcoin policy, he realized, looking around, that Bitcoiners obviously, Bitcoin is the hardest money ever, and the smartest, best and brightest people are working on Bitcoin. So how do you incentivize those people? How do you target those people? We want the smart guys. We want the good guys. And El Salvador had been the most violent country in the world, but it was like a country that had been it was like stranded and abandoned, right? So you had a lot of stranded energy, you have volcanoes everywhere, you have earthquakes everywhere with these volcanoes, and the people themselves, the population and the economy had been abandoned over the previous 40 years. People were fleeing. So all his policies are to paso a paso, step by step, change this around and turn the tide of migration away from out of El Salvador to back to El Salvador. How do you tap in to all of that geothermal? How do you incentivize people to come build some energy infrastructure for you? Because those volcanoes have been there for thousands of years, but nobody builds energy infrastructure for them. Because the people were abandoning the country, the economy had been abandoned, and there was nothing there. But his process of securing the nation, protecting the population, life, liberty, and property, bringing the Enlightenment there, you incentivize the growth of the economy through Bitcoin, right? The Bitcoiners come to mine Bitcoin, and we're part of Volcano Energy. The roadmap is to build the energy infrastructure around the geothermal. So we will soon be starting some test drills on that, but it's a long process, but it's the long-term plan.
Well, and over the last 2 years, a lot has changed. And I was reading into some of those policies from President Nayib Bukele, and Santander Bank put out a report saying that tourism has been boosted in El Salvador, and they largely attribute it to Bitcoin and the increased security, the fact that the murder rate and the crime rate has dropped so much. And despite the criticism that the country faced, especially from the IMF early on, their bonds are pretty much outperforming every other sovereign nation. So can you share a little bit more about that and how they're really breaking out against all the criticism that happened, and they're outperforming?
Right. So with Bitcoin, it's pristine collateral. It's perfect money. It's aesthetically gorgeous. It's the Sistine Chapel of money. It lifts humanity. People buy gold because they're full of fear. People buy Bitcoin because they're full of faith. It's a completely different opposition of thought, but it's still the hardest money out there. And so with El Salvador, which started out as a $27 or $28 billion economy before Bitcoin, it's now busting out. And Bitcoin and the ethos of Bitcoin, the philosophy of Bitcoin, the brand of Bitcoin, which obviously President Bukele personifies and exemplifies, and he's the global leader in this. It boosts the entire economy. Forward direct investment is up substantially. Tourism is up over 100%. And as these banks are pointing out, it's due in large part to Bitcoin. 2 years ago, they had 0 cruise ships. This year, they'll have something like 15 cruise ships. The property prices are going up a lot. Wages are relatively going up. So it's a Bitcoin foundation and the way what we've been working on, I think it's fair to say, is to make sure that this idea of Bitcoin country is maintained, that it's a Bitcoin maximalism is really the way forward. Because once you step off the Bitcoin path, it's not just a gradual shift into something else. You're stepping into an elevator shaft, and you're dropping 30 stories, and you're going splat into Sam Bankman-Fried's vagina, right? There's no really other path. As the high priest of Bitcoin, I can tell you that the path narrows. and which I borrowed from another guy. You may have read about him in the Bible. And there's no accommodation for anything but Bitcoin. Listen to Michael Saylor. He's still learning about Bitcoin. He's got freaking $4 billion of it. He buys it every day, and he's still like, I just figured out something else. Right? There's no end to how much you can learn and appreciate. It's like going into, why is the Mona Lisa seen by 60,000 people or 30,000 people a day or something, some incredible number? There's no end to what you can see in it, because it's perfect in that sense, so it's elevating to the human spirit. So to answer the question, it's the Bitcoin decision, and the president was very cognizant and wise in this regard, triggered an enormous ripple effect. Oh my God.
Oh my God. But also, he retweeted that, and he said what he always says is, I told you so, right? And that's the thing about being this tiny country against these Goliaths of nations who don't want you to win, is bullies always tell you exactly what they fear the most, and they tell you what you can't do, and then you do it, right? So that's the passo passo. That's the step. The moves we always take are in order to win, but they tell us how to win, essentially, by fearing what we're doing. So in terms of, say, for example, Volcano Energy, which was, we will, the Volcano Bond, everybody knows about the Volcano Bond, and everybody's always asked when Volcano Bond. A Volcano Bond was announced on the stage by President Bukele in 2021 in November. Of course, interest rates, the U.S. Treasuries were down like closer to 2% now. They're like soaring every day. I don't even know what they are today, but probably Greg Foss there knows. But it's like over 5%, right? Like it's like soaring. But what we did instead of, and you could see the reaction in the media when we just did all cash. And they were like prepared to like, these gringo crypto bros, they don't even know how to get it right. They say crypto bros. They loaded the country up with debt. Instead, we're like, oh yeah, how about this? Like we have $1 billion cash. Eat that, motherfuckers. And they, that's what happened. And they, like all the financial press were just like, what? Like, how did they get this cash? What they were surprised at that. So it's fun. It's fun to do that. To tell them we told you so.
Well, let me ask a little bit more about that, because I was a reporter in California for 10 years. And now when I hear the term public-private partnership, I kind of go, I wince, because I covered a lot of public corruption that involved those. So can you share a little bit more about how that works? And I mean, there's been so much criticism against President Bukele, saying that we shouldn't trust someone who has so much power. And the point of Bitcoin is to really obfuscate the sovereign nations, like you mentioned earlier. So, why should we trust this and President Bukele in the long run?
Well, you have a country where the president has 92, 93% popularity. So he's doing the will of the people. And he has a mandate from the people to recycle every penny that comes into the treasury back into the country. And you see it every single day. The reason he's so popular is that bridges and tunnels and everything's being rebuilt. The city centers are being rebuilt. He's obviously taken the country from the most violent country in the hemisphere to the least violent country in the hemisphere. So with the PPP, public-private partnership, with Volcano Energy, it started off with the project as essentially a government bond, and it started off with a meme called Volcano Bond, which I put this meme out there, let's do a volcano bond. And it became a very memeable meme. People are like, wow, that's cool. Because my background's on Wall Street, and, I grew up during the Mike Milken and Drexel Burnham days when everything could be turned into a bond. It's like, let's do a Mike Milken bond on this and take over that. So, I just threw it out there and it became a meme. But essentially, when you dig into, is this the proper way to finance this project, or is this the most lucrative way? Is it the most logical, beneficial way? The answer is no, because you've got $1 billion essentially waiting to put into this from a very smart upscale group of folks. Just do it as a private equity deal. Furthermore, as a private equity deal, let's give the government 23% of the upside. And they obviously are being very helpful in sourcing things like land, right? You need land and other parts of the grid and the energy grid.
That's usually those
right?
public-private partnerships. What you're talking about is the government says, "Hey, we need this, highway built, and we already have issued the bond to the taxpayers, and we have $20 billion." And they're like, "Here, friend, take it." This is the opposite way. Like, we came to them. Like, President Bukele is like, "Hey, we're a Bitcoin country. We've got all these fucking volcanoes here." Sorry, is this like, are you guys business people and VIP and I shouldn't swear? Fuck no. Okay.
That motherfucker's not real.
No, so, it was the other way around. He's encouraging, he said, "We have volcanoes and come get them." And, we showed up first. So our group of investors showed up first, and we have the ability to finance the energy infrastructure.
Right,
That's
so
what he wants. That's what the president of El Salvador wants, is energy infrastructure and lower cost of energy, because the cost for the retail consumer in El Salvador is far higher than what you're paying in places like Texas and stuff. So that's what he wants as a leader, is to drive the price down for his population.
Yeah, and it's not more debt for the government. It's a private deal essentially, and they're being gifted 23%. So they get upside, and they don't have the debt. So it's
not really gifted. They're like partners as well, but we control. I work for the government, but the company controls the flow of the revenues, the investment schemes. Like, there won't be like a taxpayer hit again for another bond and to pay for the overage, and oops, we never finished the infrastructure and give us more money.
Right. So from a financial engineering perspective, it just makes more sense. So that's what became obvious once you dug into the actual financials and the best way to fund this project, and that's what was the go forward.
Well, I certainly appreciate that distinction because, like I said, I covered a lot of those projects and it ended up with a lot of cronyism. So, Stacy, you focus so much on education. And when I was in El Salvador with both of you, we had the chance to speak at Hope House to a lot of women. And that's what I saw, is a lot of hope. People feeling like they no longer have to leave the country. They can build from within. They're thinking about their futures. They're saving maybe for the first time ever. Can you sort of speak to that? Because I still think a lot of the world, they don't understand really the culture of El Salvador and how it has changed so much.
Yeah, I mean, actually, what I've been doing a lot over this past year is on education and bringing Me Premier Bitcoin into the public school system. I made that happen for, Me Premier Bitcoin and Bitcoin Beach worked on the diploma program for school kids, right? They're like high school students equivalent in El Salvador who are learning this. And we're going through the process right now of training all the teachers in El Salvador to teach this. So that's been remarkable. But at the same time, our model is like a lot of people always say, hey, Bitcoin adoption, right? We need every merchant to start using Bitcoin. How the Bitcoin office has looked at it is our metric of success in terms of adoption is how many Bitcoiners and Bitcoin companies are adopting El Salvador as their headquarters, as their place to do business. And in order to attract the best and brightest for President Bukele's policy of economic liberty is to have the full Bitcoin economy. And that includes the education. So if we're going to be like the Silicon Valley of Bitcoin, Silicon Valley had, the best education and the best and the brightest there. That's why it all happened there, right? They had Stanford, they had Berkeley, they had all the tech guys, they had Dell and all those, or whoever they were building at that time in the 60s. So when I was first working to bring companies there, they would ask about the Bitcoin core dev equivalent, like Bitcoin engineers or Lightning engineers. And we didn't have a program, so I built a program, and Kubo Plus is called. And it's like the best program in the world. The people who worked on that, like Peter Todd, like Jimmy Song, like Giacomo Zucco, like Safetina Moose, like Lisa Nygut, we got the top people to come and train our top students in El Salvador, who they had to go through a rigorous quizzes and tests and challenges to try to even be qualified to first be the first 50, and then we got down to the best 21, and then the best 12. And actually today, in a few hours, the best 6 are flying to Italy for another 2 weeks education in Tuscany, and then they're going to the Lugano Plan B Bitcoin Forum. So like, we poured huge amount. I mean, these students at Kubo Plus, it's the same sort of cost as like Harvard. Like, we're putting like huge amount of resources to train our own population. So as you know, the previous guests were saying, like, you want the sovereignty and the liberty of having your own self-sustaining cycles. Like, so to create that sort of Silicon Valley of Bitcoin, you need the entire thing. You need the brains, you need the capital, you need the volcanoes. Like, I don't believe you'll be able to do Bitcoin in the future if you don't have volcanoes.
All right, well, we're running out of time, but I did want to ask you, is there an update on Bitcoin City? And President Bukele also made an announcement saying he'd be buying 1 Bitcoin a day. So do we know if he's been doing that?
Oh, definitely. He's up at 6 a.m. Over there at Swan, talking to the private client. And Corey gets on the phone with him personally, and they talk at length, and then he puts in the order. And they're dollar cost averaging, and they're very happy about it. Bitcoin City is ready to go. I think if I were to guess, it would be, I think once we get past the selection coming up in February, that we're going to hear a lot more about it. I know that with Volcano Energy, that we, the last, you know, there's, I don't know how much I can say about it actually, but there's, it's happening. I'll say that it's happening, but, and after the election, I think you'll hear a lot more discussion about it.
Anything else, Stacy?
Yes, like I said, our metric of success in El Salvador for adoption is the number of Bitcoin, the best and the brightest of Bitcoiners and Bitcoin companies that adopt us, El Salvador, as their headquarters. So we invite everybody to come there. We're hoping that more Bitcoin miners will come there as well and help us drive down our energy infrastructure costs and energy costs for the consumer. And, you know, we have everything. We have the education programs. We have Bitcoin, a Bitcoin mining pool. We have pupusas. We have surf. We have all this stuff, all the good stuff. We have President Bukele.
Yeah, and you guys are doing such great work out there. Thank you so much. Again, big announcement today, lava pool, and I think President Bukele announcing his re-election bid, right? So thank you so much, Max and Stacy, everyone. Round of applause. Thanks.